I'm Marguerite White. I am the head of the Visual Arts Department at the Woodward School here on Hancock Street in Quincy. And I'm here today with a few students to talk about the show that we have coming up at the Crane Library. It's our annual exhibition, and I've brought some girls along to talk about both the work they've done before and the work that they're doing for this show. This show that we're doing, it's the 100th year, and I have a student, Jackie Andrade, who's a veteran of this show and also of being at this station, and she's going to talk more about the inception for this particular exhibition. The bulk of it is going to be work that's inspired by 100 years of suffrage, of women's suffrage. And we looked at vintage posters, we looked at posters going back to the late 19th century, early 20th century. Then right through the last century of going from women's getting the vote, prohibition posters, then on to civil rights, and Black Lives Matter, Occupy, the Women's March, just different ways that people maybe get their message across. It's not a show of protest by any means. It's more, the question asked to the girls was, if you needed to deliver a message, maybe to a younger sibling or to the world, what would your message be? And then we talked about how do you make an image that delivers a powerful message. So we talked about text, or symbols. We talked about different kinds of typography or how you use a symbol. And we talked about information. So there were posters we saw they were quite something, from early in the suffrage battle that had, I'll call them data posters, which had like a lot of panels, and it said, women can, and it had these panels say, they can become mayor, they can be a professor, they can be a doctor, they can be a lawyer, they can be a minister, but they can't vote. And then it had a series of men. They could be a drunkard, a lunatic, a convict. Really great terms, but they can vote. So I called those data posters. They had like lots of words. And then there are the posters of just, a hand or a peace sign or something. They were simpler, a dove, that also conveyed a great deal of information. So we used those three elements, the symbol or the text, the amount of material that you want to communicate, and the style that it's in. And then I also we brought a little bit of work. There's two posters that are, I think one is complete, one is almost complete. Because they have next week to finish them, and we're sort of going back and forth and making refinements. But I also we brought over one of the shadow theaters that we might be able to install them in this show, but we'll definitely have them on display at our Night of the Arts in the spring. These three of these students worked on this whole project, and we looked at the history of shadow theater and early animation, and this is just really neat, and it's kind of the history of storytelling. And so Abigail Cannon brought her shadow box, and so she'll be talking to you a little bit about that. And it sort of is a nice project to do before posters, because the girls were working in silhouette, and they had to think about, how do you simplify a form, how do you make like an icon, how do you tell a story and deliver a message. So we went for something that was more complicated story to like, what's one message you want to get across. I hadn't really heard of the Woodward School, like lots of people who don't live in Quincy, though I only live a mile away in Dorchester. But when I was first applying for a job here, I asked my mother if she had ever heard of it, and she said, I think Grandma Carly, my great-grandmother, was in the first graduating class. And I went, what? And then I started looking into the history, and we found her in the books, and it was established by Mary Greenleaf and Ebenezer Woodward. They had made a trust in the early 19th century because there was no place to educate girls in, I don't know about Boston, but definitely Quincy, which I mean, a classical education. There was public schools, but there was academies for the boys, so they could study Greek and Latin and physics. But there was nothing of that kind for young women. And the school actually was, didn't get started until after they had passed away. But they had donated the land and the money, and the building was built to their specs. But then when I was working here more, I found out that Ebenezer Woodward was the first cousin of John Adams, which would mean, and also his personal physician. And that would mean that Mary Greenleaf almost certainly was, we'll say, hanging around with Abigail quite a bit. And they were both certainly extremely forward-thinking women. I mean, they are the definition of feminists. They were deeply patriotic, but also patriotic in that they were here at the real birth of a new nation, and their husbands, especially John Adams, was he was writing our founding documents, and of course she wrote the famous the letter back to him with the paragraph saying remember the ladies. So I think Woodward School has got a really, really interesting piece of history. So it makes entire sense for us to do this as well. And think forward and think, we can vote. The topics that these girls are covering, it isn't just, though there wouldn't be anything wrong with it, feminist concerns or gender rights concerns. They're really what's on your mind. What do you see forward thinking for the future? And that's, I think, a legacy that Mary Greenleaf and certainly Abigail Adams as well, that's what they were thinking, like women should be thinking about these things as well as men and being proactive in their teaching. The 6th grade, the 9th grade, and the 10th grade are specifically making posters, and I think they're 7s. We'll see. And then, so they will all be definitely having the posters. And then I've got my seniors who have the really advanced work, and so there'll be a whole separate section just presenting their work. And some other students who weren't in the class this semester, but who are really serious art students, and so they've been invited to bring things. And I have one quite amazing budding 8th grade. She's my drafts person, and she's actually on the publicity. And she's going to have some big charcoal drawings. So we'll call them the Suffrage Now posters. They're going to be the bulk of the show, and then there'll be bits and pieces around the library from other students.
My name is Jackie Andrade. I attend the Woodward School for Girls, and I'm a freshman in 9th grade. I live in Quincy, Massachusetts, and I've been going to Woodward since 7th grade, so 3 years. Miss White mentioned to me that it was the 100th year of women's suffrage, and I took it upon myself, and Miss White really helped me and other people to notice that women have been fighting this battle since practically forever, and that we really wanted to make a change. So the artwork that we did was for protesting, and I wanted to show other people that butterflies and really girly symbols can also be a fight that we can win. My role was I made a bunch of posters. I helped my friend Taylor make one, and each poster said a different meaning behind it. One of my friends said, fight for women of color. Mine says, you don't need to be female to be feminine. It's all different types of protests that we can fight for. And I really wanted to introduce to everybody all new topics that people aren't normally discussing. Miss White had the amazing idea of letting the 6th grade paint butterflies or have a butterfly on each poster. And for somehow the 6th grade mentioned to make it all very masculine as long with beautiful and feminine, and it all came together. My Nana and Papa, hi, they introduced me to art before I could talk. We have 3 art studios at my Nana and Papa's house. My dad was an artist, so my entire life was just art, art, art. Today we are struggling. It's going to be a constant battle. I don't think we'll ever end it. And putting it into art just says so much more, that you have to look for the meaning. Art can be blunt and you can see it and it can be big, bold letters, but it also can be hidden, and you really have to study each and every piece to get the true definition of what it is. And today, we want to create more of that, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could just be a collage of potatoes. It still has a deeper meaning. It's never just one thing. My family supporting me is probably the only reason I'm into art. They think art's over math, which I don't know if that's true or not, but they support me in what I do and what I love, and for that I could only be grateful. So I should say thank you to them, because they're the reason I'm into this and why I love it so much.
I'm Thea Morad, and I'm in 6th grade. It's my first year at Woodward. Our assignment for this art project was it was sort of like the anniversary of the 100th year of women's suffrage, and we sort of looked at some examples on the computer, and we sort of just put down one thing that we would the whole 6th grade would do, and so we all did butterflies. It was sort of like a sign that women were free, and they're sort of just really beautiful. My message that I wrote was, we have come out of our cocoon, and it sort of goes along with, like butterflies, caterpillars to butterflies, they go in the chrysalis. I don't really know exactly how I came up with this design. I sort of put the butterfly in the middle, and then I put sort of like rays out to fill up the rest of the blank space on the poster. I'm putting more paint in. I'm not quite finished with it yet. I would say that it's just a sort of an encouraging message, and like we made these posters just to encourage, not exactly just for the women's suffrage. I would say just for everyone, no matter what gender you are. My favorite thing about art at Woodward, well, we have a lot more like supplies, I would say, and like more freedom to do what you'd like than what I used to do in elementary school. And it's a smaller class, so you sort of get more chance to do things. My classmates and we help each other, like think of ideas. Like today we were helping a friend think of because she had some blank space left in her poster, so we're thinking of the ideas where she could put like a design or like clouds, treetops. Making the butterflies, we first cut out a stencil. So, and we sort of knew, okay, this is sort of like the outline. It's not exactly the details inside, so I guess the shadow theaters, because we were just doing the outlines for those, because you only see the shadows. So I guess that sort of helps with that. I like it at Woodward. You get a lot more, since it's because of the smaller classes, you get more chance to do things, and I like that it's all girls, and you're sort of empowering them.
My name is Adelaide Strandberg. I am from the Woodward School for Girls. I'm in 6th grade. My poster was about women empowerment and how it's like the 100th anniversary of it. Let women in general live the life they want to live and not being bossed around or told to do anything. I think that the meaning of Let Me Live on the poster would be to say women need to live their own life, not being told to do whatever that they don't want to do. I didn't make the letters up. I got it from a book that Miss White has, and I just thought it looked cool. So I got the idea of the shape from I like the way that the tape makes clean edges, so I decided to just use the tape to make the bits of just clear pieces, but I didn't really have a specific shape in mind. The 6th grade did a bunch of shadow theaters, and we cut out shapes and we put them on. We cut out shapes to make silhouettes, and then we put a light behind it because we made our own little theaters, and then we like put all the shapes on the screen, and then we put a light behind it, and it made shadows. Making posters with the color seems harder because you have to get the color balance correct. But then when you make it with the shadows, you just have to get the shape correct. And then in the posters, you have to incorporate shapes and colors. The art program at Woodward, I like it because it taught me a lot about colors and how to make like things pop, and everyone there is very nice. Woodward is very different from my old school because at my old school we didn't really have that much variety of stuff to do, but now we have a lot of different things to do, and you usually get to choose what you want to do.
My name is Abigail Cannon and I'm in the 6th grade. Before I made the poster, I did my shadow theater, which was we cut out pieces of paper and we put them behind a screen and lit lights so that it casted shadows. I had originally had one idea, and then I decided that that idea wasn't really what I wanted to like send as a message. And then I started on an idea of aliens because I watched a lot of sci-fi movies, and my shadow theater is mostly just like about how it's like kind of a representation of climate change and about how we can choose what path we take. I had never cut silhouettes for a shadow box. When I was younger, I used to do collages, but I had never done a shadow theater before, and I really liked the idea, and it just made me want to go home and just make like a bunch of different stories. Cutting simple shapes did help me in designing my poster, because when doing my lettering, I had to do a lot of boxes just to get all the measurements correct, and it was helpful to kind of know how to measure everything properly. I looked at a book of typography for my letters. They weren't exactly the same, but I did try my best. What I like best about the art program at Woodward has to be the freedom. At my old school, we would have art class every other week, and we had barely any time to work on projects, so it was very limited what we could do, and it had to be either really quick or take a very long time to do. Whereas at Woodward, there's just a whole room of art supplies that you are kind of just told the guidelines, and then you say, okay, just create something that represents you. I do learn things from the projects. A lot of things are about color balance and space balance, and how everything that you put in your project does like reflect. Every like small little piece of paper that you put in your shadow theater sends a message. I am learning something about communication. It's kind of a good way to say, if you had to say something without words, how would you describe it? I do like being at Woodward. At my old school, we had a class of 18 to 19 students, and some classes had like 20 to like 23 students, and here I go into the 6th grade class and there's 8 students, and I'm like, this is great, because you get to like talk to the teacher, you get to talk to your classmates and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, maybe you could do this, and then you're like, that's a great idea. In the art room, we do help each other. I think we're all kind of like on the same, we're doing the same guidelines but completely different designs of how we're expressing our feelings. And so when you're blanking on something and you're like, I don't exactly know what to do, and you can go up to your friends and say, hey, what is this missing? And they're like, oh, maybe you could do warm colors on this side, cool colors on that side. And then you're like, wow, that's a really good idea. What I like about the Crane Library is that like I can just go off, and if I don't have a book at home, instead of like being like, oh, how am I gonna get this book? When am I gonna get this book? I can go to the library and check out like 3 books and an audiobook and just be like, I'm set. I am looking forward to the art show. I don't think I've ever really been to an art show like especially by students. So I think it's going to be really cool.